New day, new location. I've come out this morning because I want to ask the question, what is the best lens for landscape photography? So I'll be using the 100 to 400 telephoto lens, I'll be using the 50mm prime lens, and I'll be using the 24 to 105 travel lens. I'm going to talk through the pros and cons of each. I'm going to provide my thoughts at the end of the video. So let's get on with it, shall we? So the 100 to 400mm lens, the telephoto, it is a great lens to have when you see a subject and you want to shoot and it's just a little bit too far away from you. Of course, we've got a distant shore in the background. We've got some houses dotted around on the distant hill, and it's just great to be able to extend it all the way to the 400mm, and hopefully, yeah, that is perfect. Maybe actually want to just zoom out a little bit. There we go, something like that. So we get a nice amount of, we get the river, we get the land, and we get the sky in the background. And like I say, this is just a perfect lens where maybe your subject's a little bit too far away. Maybe you want to isolate your subject a little bit more. We've of course got this lovely boat on the riverbanks here in the distance. It might be just out of shot at the moment, but it's just beautiful how, of course, you can zoom in on it and you can just ignore everything else that's around you. Now, of course, it's a great lens to be able to use, but the thing is, if it's the only lens I'm taking out with me, 100mm, it's still just that little bit too tight at times. And of course, there's no reason why, just because you've got a 400mm focal length, you don't have to shoot at that distance. However, it's more than useful to have in the camera bag. I'm using it a lot more than what I used to. Being able to pinpoint landscapes, you don't need to go for the big, wide open vistas, get everything in your shot. It doesn't hurt to kind of zoom in and find the minute details in a landscape. That's the one thing with this lens I'm still trying to learn. It's the one weakness, I'd say. It's one of my weaknesses with landscape photography, but like I say, it's a good option to have in the camera bag, that's for sure. I think, as you can see with this particular location, it's a very flat landscape. There's not much to really be able to pinpoint off in the distance, and I think that's the one thing I struggle with the 100 to 400mm. I think whenever I go out and use it, it's much easier to find a nice high point and be able to zoom in on detail from up on high, or even, ironically, if I'm down the woodland doing a 400mm challenge. So next up is the 50mm lens, the prime lens, meaning I can't zoom in, I can't zoom out. And I should add that I've got the Viltrox adapter attached. This is a lens that's primarily designed for DSLR cameras, and with the Viltrox adapter, it means I can use it for more modern, the mirrorless range of cameras. Now, I was watching a Mads Peter Iversen video recently, much better photographer, knows a lot more than me, and his opinion is, as a landscape photographer, you don't use prime lenses, and to be honest, I have to agree with him, which is why you've not seen me use this lens too much. Don't get me wrong though, it's not the worst lens to have in your arsenal. By that I mean, prime lenses are perfect because they've got a much wider aperture. This 50mm in particular, I can shoot at f1.8, which in turn allows in a lot more light. And in turn, if I don't want to use the tripod, I can, of course, widen the aperture and keep the shutter at a nice, reasonable amount without having to ramp up the ISO to silly amounts. So it's got a lot of pros to it in that regard. And also, of course, when you're shooting at 1.8, 2.8 or whatever, you can go for nice artsy shots. I find you can, of course, introduce bokeh into your images. Landscape photography, there's nothing to say that you've got to have sharp images from front to back. You know how much I love going for the painterly look. We've got this lovely little pathway. I've come across this beautiful scene here in front of me. We've got some beautiful light coming through the clouds in the distance. I also normally I'm not a fan of the pylons in the background, but I love how this scene is laid out here in front of me. Now with this scene, of course, I can have the pathway scooting around. Now, if I drop the aperture to f2.8 and I go in nice and tight on a scene, depending where I focus, if I focus in the foreground, I'm going to get a lot of the background out of focus. It might just give me something different. It might give me something a little bit different in terms of the scene that I'm going for. Let's go for a nice high up shot as well. So a couple of shots there worth sharing, I hope, once I get back to Lightroom. Now, I should add that at the same time, the perils of having a nice wide aperture is you've got a more shallow depth of field. You're not going to get everything in focus. So if you do want everything in focus because you're working in low light conditions, that's where focus stacking comes into account. As I mentioned at the start of this piece as well, there's no zoom function on this particular lens. So if you're too far away from your subject, if you're too close, you've got to use your feet. And of course, if you don't have the room, if you're in a tight spot, you've got no choice but to deal with what you've got. Have I mentioned that I've come out to a new location today? Maybe I've mentioned it once or twice, but I'm here at Oare Marshes today. And God, is it muddy. We've had so much rain in the area these last couple of weeks. I'm really having to be careful where I'm putting my feet, so apologies for not looking at the camera. But I've come out to Oare Marshes today. I thought I'd try somewhere new. I wanted to be a little bit impartial, so that when I'm using these three lenses, I was at a location where I've never shot at before, so I knew that one lens wasn't going to be favoured over another. But as well, I do love coming to these marshlands, these nature reserves. They give great inspiration. It's just a great way to get out and explore, see new places. The photos that I'm taking today, they might not be worth sharing in the grand scheme of things. That's not the point, is it? It's just great getting out with the camera. So the last lens that I want to talk about today is, of course, my 24-105mm, my travel lens. Now you're sitting watching and you're probably thinking now, right, this is going to be the lens that I'm going to say is the best for landscape photography. It's the one that I use the most, and you're probably right in that regard. But stick around until the end. Of course, I'll summarise my final thoughts on this topic. Now, for me, this is the ideal focal range. I love shooting at 24mm. Another of my weaknesses in terms of landscape photography is I probably try and get too much detail, too much information in the shot. Of course, like I said at the start, I struggle to pinpoint small detail or I get too much detail. I've got to try and find that nice happy medium, haven't I? But if I'm going away on holiday, I think this is the one lens. If I had to just pick one, this is the one I would take with me. I find that when I go out 24 to 105, it's just got that kind of nice ideal focal length for me. If I want to kind of get everything in shot, I've got the 24mm. If I want to start going a little bit nice and tight, I've got the 105 focal length. Now for me, of course, I'm short-sighted. I'm not great at seeing subjects far away. So normally when I see something, when I'm walking around, it's not too far off the beaten path, so I can just shoot it as I see. Of course, with that 100 to 400mm, I've got to maybe step back, or if I'm a bit too close, I've got to forget about it, or even change lens. This, on the other hand, I can just walk around and shoot as and when I come across something. Like I say, if I had one negative, it's the fact that it allows you to kind of shoot and get too much information on screen. And if there was a kind of negative on a personal note, I'd maybe like a 15mm to 35mm lens if I could complete the holy trinity, or even just get a 16mm, and then I really can get everything in the shot, can't I? But even without having that ultra wide focal length, you can still do that with a 24mm, you can still do that with a 50mm. There's ways around it, and I'll talk about that in a future video. So time to answer the question, what is the best lens for landscape photography? Well, in all honesty, I don't think it's a question that can be answered, purely because it all comes down to personal preference, really. It also comes down to where you're shooting and or what you're shooting. For me, I'll nearly always focus on the 24 to 105mm. Like I say, pretty obvious answer. It's ideal for most scenarios for me, but it's why whenever I go out, I'll always make sure I've got the 100 to 400mm with me as well, just to be on the safe side, because I don't want to go out and miss an opportunity because I've not got the right equipment with me. Others might prefer to shoot with a prime lens using their feet to get the right type of composition. It's not a bad way to learn photography, in my opinion, and I'll probably do a separate video on the nifty 50 in the future, so keep an eye out for that. I'm going to end this video here at this causeway. I'm going to take an image with each of my three lenses, each taken at the widest focal length. I'll put all three up on screen just so you can see, just so you can compare what one scenario looks like at different focal lengths. Oh, and before I forget, take care. See you on the next one. Bye for now. I should point out that, of course, the main point of coming out here today isn't to slip and slide through the mud. Once again, the ground is so slippery. It's why, again, I'm not completely looking at the camera when I'm talking to you today. But it's to find that burnt out wreck. And of course, I've not been here in a year. So this trip could be in vain. I've not done any scouting beforehand to make sure it's still here. I've just come out and I'm just hoping it's still around.